Yeah, I don't think Mother knew about this.
Uncle Marvin was strangled by his own beard.
Yep, you never saw it coming.
And welcome, America, to America's Family History Show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth, on the program where we shake your family tree and watch the nuts fall out. Well, great to have you along today. Of course, this past week we have heard so much about the 80th anniversary of Pearl Harbor. And as a result of that, we're going to replay my interview with Jack Holder, one of the survivors at Pearl Harbor. We talked to him back in March as he released a book at that time. In fact, he's turning 100 years old today. So congratulations to Jack. You're going to hear his description of what he went through on December 7th, 1941, and how he went on to be part of the Battle of Midway as well. I mean, this guy had quite the career. And then after that, we're going to have Kate Ekman on over at our sponsors at Legacy Tree Genealogists, and she's going to talk about researching your World War II ancestors. So she's got some great ideas for you there as well. Hey, if you haven't signed up for our courses yet on genetic genealogy, how to use matches to break open those brick walls, find out more at ExtremeGenes.com, as well as a basic genealogy course waiting for you right there. It's a great gift at this time of year. And of course, you can sign up for our weekly Genie newsletter. It's free, and we'd love to have you keep track of what's happening in our world. And right now, it's time to head out to Boston, Massachusetts, where David Allen Lambert is standing by, the chief genealogist of the New England Historic Genealogical Society and AmericanAncestors.org. Hello, David.
Hello, sir, and how are you today?
I am grand. I just spent a bunch of time with family for the last few days and visited with some grandkids, had a great time playing games with them. It's nothing to make you feel more like a kid than being around kids for a while. It was great stuff.
Oh, for sure.
Hey, we got to remind everybody, by the way, if you haven't signed up for RootsTech 2022 yet, the sign-up is open at rootstech.org. It's free. Join the millions of people who are going to sign up around the world and find out how to do what you want to do in your research.
Well, I'll tell you, we get a lot of Family Histoire news for us today, including straight from Australia. And I remember being at RootsTech where C.C. Moore mentioned about the DNA will eventually be able to tell us what our ancestors look like. Well, Australian federal police have announced they're using next-generation DNA sequencing fish to be able to predict what a criminal may have looked like after a crime.
Wow.
So this is exciting news.
Yeah, it's including what sex they were, what their ethnic background may have been. It'd be fun if someday we could actually take DNA and actually recreate what they looked like. I mean, like a photograph.
Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, I have a few ancestors I'd like to have produced as 8x10 color glossies for the living room. Not mugshots in that respect. There's another mugshot related to DNA, and that would be someone who committed a crime 20 years ago. And, you know, you would think of a murder victim, you would find something that has the DNA, maybe a knife or something like that. No, this is a seashell. A conch shell.
And, really?
Yes, and this is in Massachusetts, not far from where I live. And now a family member is in jail for the murder over 20 years ago in New Bedford, Massachusetts.
Because of DNA on a conch shell?
Yep.
Wow.
You know, we probably all have seen or heard of the Band of Brothers. It was on TV, and Edward Shames, the last surviving officer from the Band of Brothers, has now passed away at the age of 99. And Colonel Edward David Shames from HBO's Band of Brothers died this past month. I'll tell you, I think that I really need a metal detector for the holidays. So, and if you were looking for a gift for your teenager, don't think of an iPod Shuffle or an Xbox. Buy them a metal detector, because a 13-year-old girl went out with her dad on her third trip fish and found the largest hoard of axes, 200 artifacts, in fact, that date back to the Bronze Age in England, including axe heads and all sorts of items. I can't find anything better than a bottle cap sometimes when I went with my old one. I'd say in this case, it's luck of the English.
Right. I mean, this is a Roman hoard we're talking about, and I don't know the rules over there, but as I understand it, I don't think the 13-year-old can keep the stuff. But obviously, she's got herself in the history books and probably would never have such a success again in her life.
Probably not, but she now says she's looking for gold, which actually leads me to our next story, also in England, where something about the size of an amulet from a Pandora bracelet was found. A tiny gold book found that dates back to the time of Richard III. Yep, he's back again in the news. They're saying that this 15th century artifact has a striking similarity to a Middleham jewel gold pendant that was probably, most likely, some connection to King Richard III, found in a parking lot. Now they're finding bits and pieces of his belongings all over the place. Maybe they should have just checked in an adjacent parking lot.
Right. You know, this is the thing, David. I mean, when we first started this show back 8 years ago, he was on like every week, because I'm going to correct you here. He wasn't found in the parking lot. That would be disgusting. No. But he was found under the parking lot. And then there was this big battle over who had the right to actually display all the remains and things related to it. Was it his birthplace or where they found him? I mean, it was kind of crazy, and it just went on and on and on. So every time he comes back, it's like we almost ought to list him as a co-host on the show.
I know. You know, we've all probably read Moby Dick or heard of the story of Herman Melville's famous white whale. Well, in the Caribbean, they've actually spotted a white sperm whale that is pretty close to the description from Melville's mythical Moby Dick. This is quite amazing. I've seen the video. It's definitely not made up. There is a white sperm whale out there in the Caribbean, and hopefully we don't have anybody going to hunt it. Well, that's all I have from Beantown this week. You got to finish your holiday shopping. Don't forget to include a membership to American Ancestors. And hey, why not save a little? Use the coupon code EXTREME and save $20 on a membership on AmericanAncestors.org. Well, time to go do some shopping after we do Ask Us Anything.
All right, David, talk to you at the back end of the show. And coming up next, if you'd like to know firsthand what it was like to be under attack by the Japanese in 1941 at Pearl Harbor, hear my visit with Jack Holder coming up, one of the Pearl Harbor survivors. He's on the way next in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show.
Unknown parentage, lineage society membership, building your family tree, leaving a legacy. Regardless of your reasons for hiring a professional researcher, Legacy Tree Genealogists can help you discover your family's past. Their genealogists are highly rated in their field with specialties in DNA analysis, historical context, and forensic genealogy. For nearly 20 years, Legacy Tree Genealogists have created thousands of professionally bound and digital reports for families like yours around the world. So whether you've hit a brick wall in your research or are just getting started, Legacy Tree Genealogists can help you tell your story and preserve it for generations to come. To receive a free estimate for professional research, visit legacytree.com or call 1-800-818-1476. That's 1-800-818-1476. We'd be happy to talk to you. Legacy Tree Genealogists.
Hey, Genies. As we've dug into our family history explorations over the past year, our community at Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies has taken off. This is where you can meet like-minded genealogists who can help you break through those brick walls and find a whole city behind it, occupied by ancestors whose names you don't even know yet. This is where you can learn from your fellow Genies and ask questions, because many in our community have already been into some of the records you're looking for. Genealogy and Breakthrough Strategies is free. What a great place for brainstorming and getting to know other people who totally get your passion for family history research. If you're looking to take the next step in sharpening your skills, here's a great chance to learn from others and give back in areas you've already become expert in. So join us. That page again is Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. It's a long name, but we cover a lot of territory. Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. Hey Genies, it's Fisher here, and my shiny new ExtremeGenes.com website has been described as having that new car smell. I love hearing that. Having been with you for over 8 years now, it felt like time to help out listeners and followers who need to know the basics of genealogical research, as well as how to understand your DNA test results, and to be able to put them to work for you, breaking down brick walls, identifying birth parents, locating new cousins who may have photos and information that can't be found anywhere else, and verifying your paper trails. Yes, DNA can do all that, and I can show you how. Check out the all-new ExtremeGenes.com website and download the free Genealogy Strategy Roadmap and the free DNA Starter Guide. Then, if you like what you see, you can take those next steps to sign up for the video courses that you can watch at your leisure. I'll take you through all the basics, step by step. Find out more now at ExtremeGenes.com. And welcome back to America's Family History Show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth, and what an honor it is for me today to be talking to 99-year-old Jack Holder in Arizona. Jack has written a book called Fear, Adrenaline, and Excitement, covering his military experiences. Jack, welcome to Extreme Genes.
Well, thank you so much. It's my honor to join you.
Well, Jack has quite a history because during the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, he had, what would you say, a front row seat, Jack?
I definitely had a front row seat. I had the duty that day. It was when the section leader began roll call in our hangar. We heard a fast-moving aircraft, and moments later, a terrible explosion. The hangar beside us blew up. We received the first bomb that fell in Pearl Harbor.
You were right there for the first bomb.
It dropped about 100 yards from me. I was right there.
Oh, my goodness. So the beginning of World War II was 100 yards from you.
Yeah, that's correct.
Wow. And you were, as I understand it, on Ford Island?
I was on Ford Island, yes. Ford Island is a small island right inside Pearl Harbor itself.
Mm-hmm. And I understand that you actually got really close to one of these planes that I guess was strafing?
Well, he got pretty close to us. It so happens that when we run outside and seen the aircraft overhead with the rising sun and signal in the air, it so happened that one of my shipmates remembered there was a sewer line under construction behind our hangar. He says, "Let's go for the ditch, follow me." We all ran, jumped in it, sat there clinging to each other. And, of course, one of the pilots seen us. He circled, strafed the ditch, missed us by probably 3 feet. He hit the dirt piled up beside the ditch.
Oh, my gosh. And as I understand, you were actually so close as he came over that you could see his face.
I could see his face. I could see his unbuttoned helmet flapping in the breeze and all those big, shining white teeth.
Really?
I guess he was pretty happy.
He looked like he was enjoying himself.
I think so.
Wow. How long had you been at Pearl Harbor before all this happened?
Just 6 days short of 1 year.
So as you were in this ditch after this initial attack, what happened then? Where did you go?
Well, this was a two-wave attack, as you well know, and I'm not sure how long we were in the ditch, but it was an hour and 15 minutes between the two waves. Shortly after the first wave was over, we'd come out of the ditch, of course, and we started separating aircraft. We had 12 aircraft parked between the two hangars, VP-21 and VP-23, my hangar. Half of them were on fire from the first bomb that fell. We started separating burning aircraft from aircraft that weren't damaged, and I was ordered by the leading chief to grab 2 more sailors and go in the hangar and get the squadron commander's aircraft ready for flight. We got the engines ready, buttoned them up. The aircraft was rolled out, refueled, loaded with 2 1,000-pound bombs. The captain and his crew flew for 19 hours looking for the Japanese fleet, but found nothing. But the devastating thing that I seen, I could look down Battleship Row and see the Arizona, the Nevada, West Virginia, Tennessee, California, Utah. I've seen the Oklahoma turn turtle up, Seen all these ships on fire, all sinking. I seen gentlemen jumping in the water, trying to swim through water covered in burning oil. A lot of them died in the water. Some of them died when they reached the beach. And, of course, some of them made it. But it was a sight I'll never forget.
I can only imagine. How many days did you remain at Pearl after the attack on December 7th?
Well, the normal routine of search and flight training, everything, resumed immediately after the raid. This continued until Midway.
I see. So you stayed there. You were still based there.
Oh, yeah.
And so you were a pilot. Had you received your pilot training before December 7th, or was that just a continuation after the attack?
No, in the military, I was a flight engineer. I went to flight school after I got out of the Navy and was an airline pilot, but I was strictly a flight engineer in the Navy.
At that point. So as I understand it, Midway, of course, was not that long after Pearl Harbor. It was just a matter of several months, and it was obviously very important because you had 4 Japanese aircraft carriers trying to lure in what they thought was what was left of the United States Navy. They were going to attack it, take over Midway, and then they were in a position where they could have attacked the West Coast. But we, of course, intercepted all their messages, so we knew what the plan was. And so we had our own carriers out there that they didn't even know existed at that point, and you were part of the Battle of Midway.
Let me run through that complete story of that. Immediately after the Jimmy Little raid Tokyo, Naval Intelligence began receiving numerous coded messages using the letters AF and AO. We'd understood part of the Japanese code. We knew that one of these stood for the Aleutian Islands and the other for Midway, but we could not tell which was which. Our chief of intelligence told Admiral Nimitz, he says, I've devised a plan to ascertain what they mean. He says, we can send out an uncoded message saying Midway has just had a freshwater condenser failure. Nimitz said, send it. The Japanese took the bait. They sent out a coded message saying AF has just had a freshwater condenser failure. Nimitz then sent a small task force to the Aleutian in disguise, sent the rest of the fleet to Midway, positioning the aircraft carriers in one position, the rest of the fleet in another. My squadron left Pearl Harbor on May 28, 1942, began our search for the Japanese fleet. June the 3rd, we found them 450 miles northeast of Midway, proceeding towards Midway under a weather front.
And when you say we found them, you were part of the group that did find them.
I was in the aircraft that made the report of their position.
That is amazing to me. And it's a little personal, too, because I had an uncle, Don Olson, who served on the USS New Orleans at the Battle of Midway, and I've reviewed his naval records and the experience at that time, and it was a world-changing battle, the Battle of Midway, because it protected the West Coast, it pushed the Japanese back. I believe they were also planning on attacking Australia, and this really,
that's right.
This was kind of the end of their pushing east and their aggression in that direction. They had to go into a more defensive position after this, right?
That's right. They wanted to control all the shipping lanes for the Philippines.
Do you think back on this, Jack? I mean, you're 99 years old now. You must look back on this 80 years ago. It seems, I'm sure, like another lifetime ago.
Well, it seemed like an awful long time, but I remember it like it was yesterday.
I bet it does. It's life-defining when you go through something like that, yes?
That's very true, yes.
How many of your friends from those times are still with us?
Recently, I have a very good friend here, Rear Admiral by the name of Jim Simons. He had some contacts, and I come up with a group of there's at least 30 or 40 names that I remembered in my squadron, and they did research on these, and they could not make contact with a single one.
So you're it?
Well, I'm the only one in Phoenix. I think there's only 2 of us in Arizona. You know, you're talking about Australia a while ago. I've been back to Pearl Harbor on December the 7th several times, taken back by the Greatest Generation Foundation. The president is a gentleman by the name of Timothy Davis. He's Australian. When I first met him, I says, how come you Australian got mixed up in all of this? He said, Jack, if it hadn't have been for you boys, Australia would be speaking Japanese.
That's absolutely true. You did a lot of stuff. You also fought in the Atlantic Theater.
I was transferred to back to San Diego, went through training in the B-24 Liberator. In April 1943, flew 56 missions of anti-submarine patrol over the English Channel and the Bay of Biscay, which is the western coast of France.
That's unbelievable. And I'm seeing a number here that you flew 315 Navy missions. How is that even possible?
Well, I don't know. I just... When they say go, you got to go.
You go and you go, but I mean, really, what were the odds of survival with that number of missions under your belt?
Well, I can tell you this. Every time you board that aircraft, you say, well, maybe this might be the last one. You never know.
I can only imagine. 2 Distinguished Flying Cross medals, and then afterwards you worked as a corporate pilot. What a life.
Yeah. That was a charter airline, Los Angeles Air Service in California for 7 years. Then I went to a Union Oil Company as a corporate pilot for another 10 years.
Well, what a piece of family history you've written for your family, Jack. And this has been a real honor to talk to you. Did your dad serve in the service?
My father was a World War I veteran. He never talked too much about it, but he did tell me he spent a year crawling through the mud in France.
Oh, wow. That had to be just as difficult as everything you went through.
That's true, yeah.
Unbelievable. And you turn 100 in December.
December will be 100, yes.
Unbelievable. He is Jack Holder. He's from Phoenix, Arizona, a survivor of the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. At Ford Island, and actually was able to look right into the face of one of the Japanese pilots who was strafing him and his buddies. What a life, what a story, Jack. You've written this book about your life. What's it called?
Called Fear, Adrenaline, and Excitement.
Did you come up with that title?
Yes, I did.
And what does it mean to you?
Well, it means exactly what I experienced. There's a great difference in being afraid and the moment of fear. If a person is afraid, it creates bad decisions. But a moment of fear tells the adrenaline to start flowing, then it changes to excitement.
So where can people get this book?
On Amazon and my website, jackholder.org.
Wonderful. Jack, thank you so much. I look forward to reading the book.
Okay.
All right, this past week, we commemorated the 80th anniversary of Pearl Harbor, and of course, we just heard our great visit with Jack Holder, who was there and barely survived it. And I thought this might be a great time to bring back to Extreme Genes Kate Ekman from our friends over at Legacy Tree Genealogists, our great sponsors, to talk about researching your World War II ancestors. And, there's a lot of things to be found still. A lot of things have been lost, too, because there was a huge fire in St. Louis at an archive there from 1973. Kate, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you.
Hi, thanks for having me on again.
You have a great military background in your family.
Yes, I do. My father served in the Air Force. My uncles and cousins were Army, Air Force, Navy, back to the Civil War, Revolutionary War era. So we have a lot of history of military service in my family.
Probably makes military research something even more interesting for you.
It is. It feels more personal. Even, when I'm doing for other clients, it still feels like I'm connected to it.
Sure. Well, let's talk about, first of all, the records that are available, personnel files, because I think that's what most people would find the most personal and the most fascinating. And having just completed this year a book on all my family in World War II, which included 2 sailors in the Navy and another who was in the Army Air Corps, I found that the personnel records of my Navy people were absolutely incredible.
They are. The personnel records are so helpful because they provide us with potentially a lot of detail about our ancestors' service during World War II. You might have enlistment papers. You'll have the records of what occurred during their service all the way through to their discharge.
Yeah, in fact, there was an actual recruitment photograph of one of my uncles in there standing next to the measuring stick that they'd have on the door. And
Yes.
in his Navy suit for the first time. And I was actually able to colorize that picture. It's just absolutely fantastic. And the other thing about
Wonderful.
getting these personnel records, aside from the things that you're talking about, you can see, for instance, when they were advanced in rank or for
Yes.
misbehavior knocked down in rank or go through something like that, what their duties were, for instance, in the Navy on the ship, what ships they were on, and when they transferred from here to there. And the thing that I really learned in the process of putting this book together, especially in the instance of these two Navy members, was that if you get the name of the ship, then you can research the history of the ship. And it will tell you what battles they were in during what dates. And then you can research the battles and find out what that entailed and what maybe happened there. And in the case of each of my sailors, I found online a digitized version of a journal that one of their shipmates kept during the same period they were there. So we actually got a personal account from somebody of what the experience was like. And a lot of it was quite different than what my uncles described, because my uncles tended to downplay, at least my one uncle tended to downplay exactly how severe the battle was. He would talk about, oh, we'd shoot at some German planes flying by, when in fact, no, they were dive bombing on the ship trying to sink it, and they were zigzagging trying to avoid bombs. And it was amazing, though, to follow it from the personnel file out to the actual battles themselves.
We have the same ability to do those with Army records as well, if you're fortunate enough to have those records still existing. You mentioned the fire in St. Louis.
Yes.
And unfortunately, that destroyed about 80% of the Army personnel records from 1912 to 1950. Obviously, World War II is right in the middle of all of that.
And World War I.
And World War I as well. So you have a chance, but only about a 20% chance of being able to get those personnel records for your Army ancestors.
I'm glad you said that, because I think most of us, and I thought it too, is that they were all gone, that the only things left were the Navy. But I talked to someone recently who did obtain the Army personnel records of relatives. And I was kind of surprised. I'm thinking, well, how can that be? But apparently 20% of them did survive. So you have to really apply to find out.
Well, and they also have auxiliary records. When you apply, if they don't have the military personnel files, they'll tell you that. But they will let you know then they do have some other auxiliary records. It could be as little as a one-page sheet for their final payment when they were mustered out. But it still gives you information. It will tell you the unit with which they served. It will tell you when and where they were mustered out, how much they were paid, where the check was sent. So you can still gather information from that one single page. And then, as you said, with your naval records, then just follow the path. Take those little pieces of information and learn about the battles that they served in from there.
And then you can actually go over to Ancestry. They've got a lot of the personnel records, just kind of the indexes more than anything. Tells you what ships or what units people were attached to during World War II. And you can use that to follow through the same thing. Even obituaries might tell you the name of a ship or some battles they were in, and then you can further expand that research to really put together their story.
You can use some other interesting sources for finding that information as well. Veterans of foreign wars, the VFW chapters that they may have belonged to, there may be information there. The internet is full of societies or groups of people who are veterans or who are the children of veterans of different units, and they collect the history and the photographs of that unit's wartime service. And then, of course, you can also find things like the Eisenhower Library has World War II military records that aren't specific to a soldier, but to units and regiments and the things that they did during the war as well.
Yeah, you never know where some of these pictures are going to come up. In fact, one of my Navy guys had a stepson who, shortly before he passed, sent over a photograph. It was one of those really long, narrow pictures.
Yes.
And it was his graduating class from the Navy. He actually joined the Navy during the Depression. And you can see him standing off to the left, and we have a marvelous copy of this thing now. I always maintain that there's an entire family history library for every family in America in attics and basements all over the country, just spread out among people we know, and in many cases, a lot of people we don't know.
Yes, yes. I was also thinking about another avenue for research that we sometimes ignore, which is cemeteries. Obviously, if your ancestor was buried in a military cemetery, that's going to provide you with some information about the unit that he served in.
Mm-hmm.
But even a non-military cemetery, that headstone may have information on it. Oftentimes, their unit of service, their years of service. And so those are other places to go look for a starting place to find that information about your ancestor. So many of the men who served in World War II were hesitant to talk about their experience.
Oh, yes.
And their children knew they served, but that was it. And their grandchildren didn't even know that much oftentimes. That's what gets them started. I saw my grandfather's grave. It said he served in World War II. Tell me about what he did.
It really tells me that the number one thing you can ever find about anybody is what unit they served in.
Yes.
And then the number two thing would be, what were the dates? Because you can then go research the unit. And then if you figure out, okay, he went in or she went in on this date and left at this time, then you can find out, okay, well, what happened to the unit in between those dates?
That's exactly right. Now, I know some of your listeners will be aware of the fact that things like the National Archives, the National Personnel Records Center in St. Louis is closed right now because of the pandemic, and they may be concerned, well, I can't start my research because that office is closed. And it is. It's still closed right now, but these other things you were talking about, obituaries,
Yep.
The headstones, all those are great places to start and mine the internet to find what you can get from there. And then once the Personnel Records Center opens up, then you can go ahead and order those documents.
Take a crack at it. She's Kate Eckman. She's from Legacy Tree Genealogist. Kate, thanks once again for coming on the show. Always love having you. Have yourself a great weekend.
Thanks, Scott. This was fun.
And coming up next, David Allen Lambert returns for another round of Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show.
Unknown parentage, lineage society membership, building your family tree, leaving a legacy. Regardless of your reasons for hiring a professional researcher, Legacy Tree Genealogists can help you discover your family's past. Their genealogists are highly rated in their field with specialties in DNA analysis, historical context, and forensic genealogy. For nearly 20 years, Legacy Tree Genealogists have created thousands of professionally bound and digital reports for families like yours around the world. So whether you've hit a brick wall in your research or are just getting started, Legacy Tree Genealogists can help you tell your story and preserve it for generations to come. To receive a free estimate for professional research, visit legacytree.com or call 1-800-818-1476. That's 1-800-818-1476. We'd be happy to talk to you. Legacy Tree Genealogists.
Genies, Ancestry.com has just released an important new database, and it's free. It's the Freedmen's Bureau Bank Records and the Freedmen's Bureau Marriage Records. These records are a game changer for African American research. For the first time, searches for ancestors among these records can be done solely within these two databases, making discovery easier than ever before. Every name in these mostly post-Civil War records has been indexed. We're talking 3.5 million names, and they often include the names of parents, siblings, children, former slaveholders. They commonly provide ages, marriage information, and so much more. In some cases, you can read in their own words some of their stories as well as their post-emancipation ambitions and challenges. If you've been hesitant to seek out your African American ancestors because of the pre-1870 research challenges, now is the time to see what information is waiting for you right now for free. Only at Ancestry.com. Anytime is a great time to learn more about your family. Did you miss RootsTech Connect this year? It's not too late to experience RootsTech classes, keynotes, and how-to content. Just visit rootstech.org to see what you missed and to experience RootsTech Connect on your own timetable. Select inspiring and insightful messages that will help you in your pursuit to connect with and share your family story in new ways. You can then use the free resources found at Family FamilySearch.org or the Family Search Family Tree app to have a deeper personal experience getting to know your family, past and present. Connecting with family and learning about your ancestors provides healing, peace, and a sense of belonging. And it's easy to share what you learn with others to help and inspire them as well. Visit RootsTech.org for some inspiration or visit FamilySearch.org to continue on your journey of family discovery today. All right. I love this segment of the show. It is Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and extremegenes.com. Fisher here. David Allen Lambert back from NEHGS over there. And David, our first question today is from Katie Glick in Minneapolis. And she says, David, I've heard you mention you've done the genealogy for several famous people. What surprises did you find for them? Good question, Katie.
Ooh, well, gosh, there's been a batch of them over the past 20 years that I've worked on, but I can pick up a couple right off.
Okay.
David McCullough, who, of course, narrated so much of Ken Burns' The Civil War, and a famous author. He wrote Truman, Johnstown Flood, but 1776 and John Adams are very popular.
Of course.
I found some Revolutionary War soldiers he didn't know that he had in his family tree. That was real fun.
Really? What was his reaction to that?
Well, I'm sure it was revolutionary. Well, actually, he was very appreciative. In fact, he said something very important that I've kind of held with me ever since then. He said that if you want to be remembered in the next century, keep a journal. And it's the truth. Because think of so many things that are electronic now.
That's right.
That we don't print off. That leads me to another discovery I made, and I talked about McCullough with Ken Burns shows. And, of course, Ken Burns having the PBS documentary on the Civil War. And I was able to do his genealogy, and I found out that his ancestor on the Flowers family, which were from the mid-Atlantic states, were the same family that was Abraham Lincoln's. So I was able to give Ken Burns a cousinship with Abe Lincoln.
Wow, how cool is that? What was the distance?
It was way back. Of course, it was in the 1600s. But just for the fact that he didn't know, he told me how thrilled he was. So that was really nice.
I'll bet.
Doris Kearns Goodwin, I was able to give the historian of the Kennedys a connection that I have. Mary Perkins Bradbury, a witch accused at Salem in 1692. Nathaniel Philbrick was another person. Now, Nathaniel Philbrick wrote the book In the Heart of the Sea, which Ron Howard turned into the movie. It's loosely based on the story of the whale ship Essex. That was the story that Melville heard, which then turned into Moby Dick. Now, Philbrick lives on Nantucket. Always thought he was an off-islander until I told him that Tristram Coffin, the only governor of Nantucket, was his ancestor. He incidentally is my ancestor and also your wife's ancestor, too.
That's true, yes. and you know, the thing is, too, those early families of Nantucket were all pretty much interrelated, so there may be several others on that island that tie together. But that's a great story, especially if Philbrick thought that he was an off-islander or was considered as such. If you're a descendant of Tristram Coffin, it's a whole different thing. And by the way, he wrote, I think, what is the definitive book about the Pilgrims and Plymouth, and that is Mayflower, one of the great books of all time. If you have any Mayflower connection at all, you have to have that book for your library. It's absolutely unbelievable. Any others?
Well, I was going to say that I've had the honor of working on Angela Lansbury, Michael and Kitty Dukakis's genealogy. So there's been some fun stories. Some of them are just small little connections to connect an ancestor back. But we found dozens of different presidents and royal lines for people over the years. It's been really fun, and I hope there are many more to discover down the road.
And these are basically people that come in as guest speakers at the New England Historic Genealogical Society, yes?
Right, for any of our annual dinners, usually our April dinner or sometimes our fall dinner.
Interesting. Great stuff. And what a great opportunity for you, David. What fun.
It really was.
All right. And thanks so much for the question, Katie. It was a really good one. A lot of good stuff in there, too. What fun to work on celebrity genealogies. And coming up next, we have another question in Ask Us Anything. This one having to do with collecting ancestral documents and autographs. Yeah, hear what we've got to say about it coming up next when we return on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, in 3 minutes. All right, second time around for Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show at extremegenes.com. And David, we've got an email from Rick M. in Tampa, Florida. And Rick says, Fisher and David, I've heard you two talk about collecting documents and autographs. Do you collect signed stuff of your ancestors? The simple answer is, Rick, yes, we do when we can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. I mean, a lot of times it's not getting the originals unless we can swindle away obtain from a cousin a signed document or letter or postcard. And I mean, I have a couple of those, but a lot of times it's copies. Yep. How about you, Fish? How have you lucked out on the eBay circuit finding relatives online?
I found one signature online. It was the brother of my second great-grandfather. The brother's name was Theodosius Secor, and he was a famous shipbuilder in New York City in the 1800s. Actually built part of the Monitor. Wow. And he was in business with Commodore Vanderbilt. And there was a document online that he and his son-in-law both signed. So I snarfed that. Also picked up a signed document between my great-grandfather and his brother in their business partnership in New York City in the 1880s. And that came through the estate of a third cousin who passed away. And then all the family stuff came my way, and that was with family Bible pages and other things. So I really treasure those. And I was thinking about it. It's like, yes, I have a couple of first greats. I don't have any of my second greats on anything original. But there are so many places to get the copies. And over the years, I've written histories of the various branches of both my family and my wife's family. And I like to put a page in there somewhere at the beginning or the back where it's just filled with different signatures of the people we wrote about, and just try to collect them that way. It's really fun because certainly you can do a handwriting analysis on it through certain people, and they can give you an idea of what their personalities were like or what they may have even been going through at the time they signed a certain record.
Right, and it's true with family. I mean, you can get a signature of somebody when they were a child and just learned how to do penmanship, or you can get a young adult, or later in life, or better yet, the maiden name signature of your mother, and then her married signature. Part of your life with one name and then having another one later.
Well, we're working right now on a history of my wife's father's side of the family, and I have a folder on him, and I was going through it the other day and found that there are all kinds of cards in there, like a fishing license that he signed back in the 1950s, I think it was. And then he's got his military card that he signed and several other things. I have things like that from my grandfather as well. So you can take those items and either frame the original carefully with UV glass and acid-free stuff, obviously, to protect them if you do it that way, or make a great copy of it and protect the originals. But they really personalize an item of family history when you have that signature on them. So I always found that really interesting and makes any item like that much more personal.
It really does. In fact, I have my grandfather's Canadian passport, and I have books from the funerals of my uncle and my grandparents, and, get signatures of other cousins that you may normally just get a card that's signed, Uncle John and Aunt Doris, but this is their full signatures on an item. So that's pretty good.
Sure, the guest book from a funeral or something like that. I have a couple of those.
Exactly.
Those are really interesting, too, because sometimes you go check out some of the folks who signed them that you didn't know much about and see what their history was. And we found several who did some amazing things in World War II, including one who escorted the atom bomb on a train across the country with the bomb actually handcuffed to his wrist. I mean, it was just a crazy story. Anyway, thanks so much for the question, Rick. We appreciate it. Hope that answers that for you. And David, thank you very much for coming on, and we'll talk to you again next week.
All right, my friend.
All right, that's our show, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks once again to Jack Holder, the Pearl Harbor survivor, for talking about the experience, and to Kate Ekman from our sponsors over at Legacy Tree Genealogist, talking about World War II research. If you missed any of it, of course, catch the podcast on Apple Media, iTunes, iHeartRadio, ExtremeGenes.com, and Spotify. Talk to you next week, and remember, as far as everyone knows, we're a nice, normal family.